All right. Hey, geographers. Um, First off, congrats. I just came from the girls wrestling meet. You guys kicked butt. That was awesome to see. So congrats. Um, Wrestling match. You don't say meet in wrestling, right?
Salt on the fries.
Put salt on the fries yourself. All right. So we are now going over internal boundaries. The next two to three sections of this unit is like stuff that stuff that I know a thing or two about. Overlaps with um, you know, political science a lot. So if you want to talk about this more, I would love to. So this is about internal boundaries. So we've been talking about boundaries between nations, between sovereign entities. Now this is ones within. Now keep in mind, there's lots of different examples. Internal boundaries in the United States are going to be different than internal boundaries in Japan, in Chile. Some countries don't even have many internal boundaries. But for sake of, I guess, efficiency, um, AP, the College Board, mostly sticks with like internal boundaries of Canada and the United States for whatever it's worth. All right. So some of the things we'll be talking about with internal boundaries are voting districts within them, redistricting, and also gerrymandering. I believe all three are vocab words, so you may have a little bit of familiarity with them already. And if you did take the politics and government course here, this is probably very familiar to you as well. Something to keep in mind also is how do these three things, voting districts, redistricting, and gerrymandering, impact elections, right? They all have significant outcomes, a significant impact on the country as a whole. Now, so internal boundaries, we're talking about subdivisions. Okay, so you're dividing up countries into smaller areas. Now, this can be confusing because we might be thinking like country, state, county, town. Notice this is not really a map of counties of New Jersey. This is a map of voting districts. And there is a difference because voting districts can take up many counties. As you see, there are some of the southern counties which aren't as heavily populated. And there can also be several voting districts within a county, as we see up north where it is more heavily populated. So when we think of where these voting districts are, we know in the United States we have states. I hope we know this. And Canada, they have provinces. So those are two examples. So voting districts are local geographic areas of a larger country in which you vote for representatives in Congress. So in your voting district, you may vote for a mayor, someone on your board of education, for president, for governor, but you're also going to vote for representatives. So the people that represent you in the government. Now, in our case, in New Jersey, that can happen in two different ways. We have voting districts within the state of New Jersey, where you vote for representatives to represent you in Trenton, but we also have separate voting districts for representatives to represent us in DC. So just keep in mind that they're not going to ask you about the two different types here, but just keep in mind, when they ask you something, what exactly are they asking? And as far as this course goes, they're usually asking for your representation that represents you at the national capital. Okay, so when we talk about this, just it is important. You should know like your districts. So you see, Morris County is not just the 11th district. We also have the 7th district here. Our representative is Mikey Sherrill, who so you should know who that is. Scale matters. So just we talked about scale a whole bunch in the first unit, and scale matters with these subdivisions as well. So if we look at the district, right, a district may have its own unique demographics, its own unique characteristics, right? And then it might be part of a larger state with unique characteristics, and then part of its own country. So I'm going to give you an example, and where we live is actually a very good example of this. So this is a map of how New Jersey voted for the recent elections this past November. So you can look at Morris County, and you can see that Morris County as a whole is a red county. Now, even though counties and districts are different, I yes. Now, it is not as red as it used to be. You see, it's more of that pinkish shade, but it still leaned Republican, right? Now, our specific district leans a little bit more Democrat. So it's good to know that. So we have a Democratic leaning district, but if you zoom out, we live in a Republican leaning county. But then if you zoom out even more, we live in a Democrats leaning state. So we're like a blue district in a red county in a blue state in a red leaning country. So the country voted for Trump. Now, that doesn't mean every state did, every district did, every county did, right? So we'll talk about that more with federalism in the next section. But this is just to show you how scale matters. Because if you just look at, like, oh, New Jersey voted blue, we did, but it doesn't show you, like, if you actually look at the state, you'll see, often once again, the more highly populated areas are more blue, where the less populated areas are more red. And if you want to take the government course, or just talk to me about it, and I can talk to you guys about this for days. All right. Another important term to learn is redistricting. So think of those districts, and then you change it, right? Every 10 years, we have a national census, and it gathers information, and we have a population. So populations are going to change every 10 years. Some areas will go up, some will go down. Some areas, like people might move more from one area to another. So then they might change where these representatives should, like how many representatives each section should have, right? So this is a way of changing. That doesn't mean the United States as a whole is going to change or that New Jersey is going to change, but the voting districts within them may change every 10 years. So this is an article just from a few days ago. And usually redistricting is also, it's usually going to benefit one party more than the other when you take all the redistricts and add them up together. So read this for a second, because it uses a few terms from this unit. Because of partisan, so that means like party related, and racial gerrymandering, we'll talk about gerrymandering next, you end up with these skewed results and legislative bodies that don't necessarily reflect the political makeup of either the states or writ large the House of Representatives representing the political desires of the American people. Former AG under Obama. So it's important to know that when you change districts, right, it could change who the representatives are, who goes to Trenton, who goes to DC. And our goal is to make it accurately reflect the people as close as possible. That doesn't always happen. And that's something that has gone to court. It's gone to the Supreme Court many times. So here comes this term, gerrymandering, named after Elbridge Gerry, one of our founding fathers. He was there helping, with the Declaration, still involved in the Constitution, a little bit of an anti-federal. Well, we won't get into that, but maybe we'll bring the name Elbridge back someday, right? So, and think of the word salamander. So gerrymandering is taking the words Elbridge Gerry and a salamander and putting them together. So it's good to know a little bit of history. So if you look at that political cartoon, how they're redistricting, like that's a weird shape. Like how would a district get shapes like that? And the idea is that it looks like a salamander. Anyway, what does gerrymandering mean? It means that the majority party in power of the state redraws the districts, right? So it's 10 years, let's redraw them so it gives our party an edge. And there's ways this can happen. They can pack. So in other words, they're going to take all the people who they think will vote against them and make the line so that they're in one district, right? So then all the other districts would support you. So we're like, oh, well, if they're sort of contained to this one area, we can easily defeat them. Another method or strategy they may do is called cracking. So this is where instead of sort of condensing your opponent into one district, they're spread out. There's a little here, there's a little there, a little here, but they never take the majority in any one district. So you would overwhelmingly defeat them as well. All right. So whenever people do that, that's gerrymandering. Redistricting, it's gone to the Supreme Court many times. How are these districts drawn? You're not supposed to take things like race into consideration. Now you may say, well, maybe like you should. There's argument that you should take race into consideration to make sure that everyone's represented. Supreme Court actually has ruled against that in the past. So we can talk about those cases if you're interested. And there's a big story the past few weeks about the state of Illinois with some tensions arising over how their map has been redrawn. So whenever the districts are redrawn, usually the minority party is going to find flaws with it. And sometimes for good reason, sometimes not. Another term you should know is a majority-minority district. So this could happen, especially in packing, all right? So that is when you take people who belong to a minority group, usually it's a racial group, not always, but usually, and then you make them a majority in a district, right? But then, like in packing, they probably don't have control of many other districts. So a majority-minority district is a district with a large minority population, once again, usually relating to race. And this is significant because demographics are related to party support, right? So if you took the politics course and you look at demographics, in recent American history, say more women tend to vote Democratic or more African American tend to vote Democratic. There's obviously exceptions. Plenty of women and plenty of African Americans vote Republican as well. But if you take these larger trends, you would sort of know, like, well, if you're going to take an African American community and sort of isolate them to this one district, well, then they might lean to this party, whereas maybe the other districts more likely lean to another, right? So it has to be careful of what criteria is put in mind when these districts are created. Sometimes this is just how it falls, because often people live in areas with similar demographics to them, but sometimes it's done a bit more malicious intent. Sometimes it's with good intent, but whichever. And this is about a lawsuit down south. This is, you can see just from a few weeks ago as well, about, did some of these redistricting areas with a majority-minority district, did it violate the Voting Rights Act? So there's always tons of court cases about redistricting and gerrymandering, and is race being used when it should not be or not. So things to keep in mind. So basically, you just want to know those three terms. Make sure you know what a voting district is, what redistricting is, and gerrymandering is. Next, we talk about one of my other favorite things to talk about, and that's federalism. So stay tuned.